Hi guys, welcome to Sitecore intro. This is a demo video on setting up your environment. So who am I? My name is Dylan Young. I'm a manager of platforms at Air Consulting and Design. I live and work in Palm Beach, Florida. I've been working with the latest versions of Sitecore 7.2 and beyond. And if you would like to reach out to me, you can do so using the links below. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. So, overview. So we're gonna, in this video, we're basically going to show setting up an existing implementation, just discussing this in general, and setting up a fresh installation using the SIM or Sitecore Instance Manager, using Sitecore 8.2, the latest version. That's the release version, and configuration of the solution in Visual Studio. So let's start with this setting up an existing implementation. So the first thing you'll do when you're working with an existing implementation is getting the latest from source control. That could be Git, TFS, or possibly SVN, which your previous team members on the project will have set up that environment for you, and so you'll just be getting latest. It's important that you know which version of Sitecore that you'll be using for the project. So sometimes, in source control, developers will check in everything to do with the Sitecore version. That's not typically best practice. Typically best practice will be to only have in source control the items that you're making changes to. So it's important that you understand what version of Sitecore the website or whatever you're implementing works with. If it's in some situations, if you're developing an open source component, it may not matter what version that you're working with, but you might want to know which version you should be testing the code against. And then lastly, you should be there's certain configurations that you should have set up in order to run an existing implementation. Some of that is connection strings. So without connection strings, you won't have your connections to your database configured. That's also another good point to mention I didn't include is you should also have your database set up. You're going to have typically 4 SQL databases and a couple of Mongo databases. Next off is a project publish location. So typically your project, the web solution that you're working with will be in a different location than the Sitecore website. So you'll publish changes from your web project into your Sitecore website. So you'll need to know where that Sitecore website exists, and then you'll need to configure your published locations to match that location. And lastly, you'll need to know kind of about the data folder location of that Sitecore website. That's important because that's where your license file exists. It's also where a lot of other things related to Sitecore lives, such as your serialization folder, your indexes, your logs, etc. The license file is extremely important, obviously, because without the license file, you won't be able to do anything. You won't be able to load the site. If you're a Sitecore partner, your license file will be a Sitecore partner license, which will be all-encompassing. You should make sure never to give that to your clients whatsoever. If you're a corporation and you've purchased the license, this will be the license file that you use, depending on what type of license you've purchased. All right, so on to setting up a fresh installation. Some items to consider when setting up a fresh installation. First off is to consider what should be added to source control. I briefly mentioned earlier that Sitecore items and even modules should never be committed to your source control. Only things that are related to things that you're changing should be added to source control. So just keep that in mind when you're creating your first solution. The next thing is this determining if you're going to use the helix pattern or not. I would actually recommend using the helix pattern moving forward, just because what is the helix pattern? It is a pattern that is, or pattern or architecture or best practice provided by Sitecore that they've said that this is the way that you should be building your sites, or building your Sitecore installations. So that's definitely something you should consider when you're creating your first solution. Next off is the solution structure. What do I mean by that? I mean, will you have kind of an end-tier architecture, such as a data layer, a core layer, a web project, etc. You could go with a very one-layer approach where you have everything in one project, but typically, if you're a larger organization, you wouldn't want to necessarily do that. The next thing is a build configuration. So if you're planning on doing CI or continuous integration or automated deployments of any kind, you definitely need to make sure that the build configuration is something that would match what you're trying to achieve. Next up is the ORM mappers and wrapper use. I highly recommend using ORM mapper or wrapper. There are several out there, such as Glass, Synthesis, and Fortis. Those are the big threes. By default, Sitecore does not come with this support. If you're wanting to do unit testing or just have more strongly typed properties and classes that represent your templates, then I would definitely recommend the ORM mapper or wrapper use. And then almost lastly is just how do you plan on tracking your Sitecore changes? It's extremely important that you have some plan for this. Using just serialization inside Sitecore, etc., will not cut it. You'll find that your developers are overriding their changes, etc. often. I would highly recommend Unicorn. It's an open source project created by Cam Figge, who's a Sitecore MVP. And like I said, it's open source. It's extremely powerful. You'll find that most open source projects will have Unicorn on it. That's the reason I will say that it's important that if you're doing an open source project that you might want to consider using Unicorn, just because all other projects and even developers that might not have TDS can use it. TDS is a commercial product. It's good. It definitely is a full featured product. Our company uses it completely, and my only concern with it is it can be a little buggy, so it's something to consider. Also, choosing a Unicorn or TDS should be considered also when you're thinking about doing your build configurations, because both of these products have different ways of handling automated deployments, etc. And then lastly, when setting up a fresh install, you should be looking at the Sitecore Instance Manager. Well, let me step back. So you've just created a project. Typically, your solution will be separated from the actual Sitecore website. Sitecore Instance Manager is an amazing tool for allowing you to spin up basically any version of Sitecore in minutes. So if you're doing an open source project, for example, you're building something for the Sitecore marketplace and you wanted to test it on 8.1 update 2, and then you want to update it or test it against 8.2, and maybe you want to test it against 8.0 update 5. You could spin up all these environments on your local machine, and then you could use your project to just publish to those locations and test in those environments. Obviously, that's not as big of a deal if you were you were just building a site for one specific version, but I still think it's a good idea for developers to use Sitecore Instance Manager. Also, Sitecore Instance Manager is extremely powerful for automated deployments. So let's go ahead and get into a demo. I'm just going to show how to create a project or create a solution and create a new project. For the demo, I'm going to create a N-tier architecture without Helix. I'm going to do a future video where we do it in Helix. So this is just going to be an N-tier architecture. It's going to use synthesis, or not synthesis, Unicorn, and it's going to use Glass Mapper. All right, for this demo, we will start with a blank slate of just the Visual Studio Open. This is 2015, but this will work with 2013 as well. So what I'll do is I'll create a new solution. So I'll go New Project, and I'll go into other project types and select Visual Studio Solutions and select a blank solution. This will allow me to add what projects I need to the solution. For this, I'll just call it example underneath my development folder. Click OK. Once that is done, I will then start adding the projects I need for this tutorial. So I will need, for this example, I will be doing a data project, an infrastructure project, and a web project. If you are doing this for your own company, you might have other projects such as core or common or some other variations of projects, maybe an integrations project for API integrations that you might be integrating with, etc. So I will go now and I will go to add new project. I will start with the web project because that's the most common type. So I will go to web, ASP.NET web application. Because we're working with Sitecore 8.2, I will leave this as .NET Framework 4.6. I won't select any of these options, and I will call this example.web. And then I'll click OK. Now you'll be presented with options for the web project. I will be selecting an empty project because I don't want all the extra features, but I do want it to be an MVC type project. I'm going to not select add unit tests, but if you wanted to use unit testing within your projects, you could select that. I will not have authentication, and I will not be hosting in the cloud. So I'll wait for that to be installed or set up. And then once it's done, I will go ahead and I will clean up some of this. I will delete the global.asax. You only really need this if you're doing something custom on application start or something like that. But it might be better to do a pipeline patch instead on the initialize of the application instead of doing app start way. All right, so I will delete this, and then I will also delete the app start folder because we don't need that, like I just mentioned. I will go ahead and create a new folder called app config. This is where all your patch configs would go to make changes to Sitecore. By default, you'll usually have an include folder inside of that. And then inside of that, you would have some sort of folder that represents the patches that you're making. It's kind of a good practice to start this folder with some sort of X. That way it runs last, but you don't have to necessarily. For this, I will go ahead and just call it X. Actually, no, not X. Z is Z example. Maybe z.example. And then I would include all my patch configs within that folder. And then when I publish this to the Sitecore website folder, it would this would be under app config, include z example, and all the patches would be the last to run because of the z there. All right, so that's done. Let's go ahead and create the additional projects. I'm going to create one called add new project, and I'm going to call it example.data. This is just going to be a Windows class library. So example.data. I will delete their example class. And this project would either have repositories or data models. I will create a repository folder, and I will create a models folder. This is where if you had class models, etc., you would place those in this project, assuming that's the way you set up your project. So models. Once that's done, I will now also go ahead and create another new project, and I will call this example.infrastructure. This represents a project that would contain Sitecore specific events, pipelines, commands, whatever you might be building, custom fields, etc. So example.infrastructure. So I'll go ahead and delete this. So the next step is what I want to do is I want to get these two projects as references inside the web project. So I'll go down to references folder and I will add reference. From the current project, I'll just check these two options. Okay. And now if I were to publish this, it would publish these DLLs as well as the example.web to the Sitecore website folder. So the next step is to create a Sitecore website or an instance of Sitecore. So the best way to do that is using the sim, which I briefly mentioned in the PowerPoint slides. So let's open up sim 1.4 is what I'm using. As you can see, I have some other instances already defined. Usually I like to kind of add a little extension just sharing what version of Sitecore I'm using for these instances. So these are both 8.2s initial releases. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and install a new instance of Sitecore. If you've never used sim before, you might want to notice that there's a get Sitecore. This is something you have to do when you first install sim on your machine. And if you click it, it will basically allow you to pick out versions of Sitecore that you want to have in your local environment. Once these are in your local environment, then you can use these to install instances of these versions on your machine. So as you can see, it basically has all of 8s in there. There's probably a way that you can get 7.5 and 7.2 and maybe other versions before that. I'm not sure. So I'm not going to go through that because I already have them pretty much all installed. So I'll go to install instance. You'll be presented with this type of screen. We'll go ahead and just specify a name for this instance. Because the name of my project is example, I'm just going to call it example-82, which just represents the version that we're installing, which is 8.2. I'll click next. Usually I typically I don't select these options. I just want a fresh blank install ready to go out of the box. If you were needing different variations you can install, these are kind of modules or excuse me, of different packages you can have that you can install on your Sitecore instance from your sim. So I'm not going to select any of these options, but you can see there's a lot of different options you can install. Next. Now it's saying it's not going to install any modules or packages. I'm going to do an install. And now it's going to run and create this new instance. What this does behind the scenes is basically moving all your files, creating a new folder, creating a new IIS, creating a new host file location for the host name that you're going to create for this local environment. It's also going ahead and attaching all the databases for this specific instance that you're creating, and getting everything else set up, moving the licenses files, all this stuff. If you've ever done a manual install, this is all the type of stuff that you would have to spend an hour, maybe potentially an hour or two setting up. So this is a great little tool because it literally in a few minutes, sometimes even less, because on my other machine it takes literally less than a minute to install these Sitecore instances. So you can spin up, you can do, hey, somebody's just written an article about 8.2, I want to try something out. You can spin up a Sitecore 8.2 instance in literally a few minutes and get right to work and start playing with that new feature within a couple minutes. There's the ability to kind of extend this Sitecore Instance Manager two ways that a lot of people mod it, I guess you would say, is having custom packages or custom modules for the sim, or there's also the whole area of, you know, if you're doing continuous integration or automated deployments, you would have potentially you could have a sim on your dev environment, etc., where you create a new instance every time you do deployment to that environment. That way you have a fresh install, you don't have any extra stuff that shouldn't be there, and it's pretty cool. So while that's running, I'll just talk about where I'm going to go to next. After that's done, we're going to set up a publishing profile to point to this environment. That's kind of the key next step. We're also going to set up all the DLLs so that we have access to them from the web project as well as some of these other projects. That will allow us to install Glass and some of the other features that we want to install. Something to keep in mind, kind of a new area of development is using something like Gulp to manage tasks inside Sitecore. So something I often do, but I'm not going to demonstrate in this demonstration, is I'll set up a gulp file that automatically takes, you'll configure settings and you'll say, hey, I want to use the Sitecore 8.2 instance. And then this gulp script will basically pull all DLLs into a folder, and everything will be wired up for you for whatever version of Sitecore that you're using. So it's kind of cool if you're doing custom module development and you want to test on multiple versions. And yeah. All right, I think I'm gonna go ahead and pause this because it's taking a little longer than usual. It's still running. Just thought of a topic that I wanted to quickly note. So I mentioned that moving the Sitecore DLLs into a folder. I should also note that there's now a Nougat feed for Sitecore DLLs. So no longer do you need to necessarily um, move these in from a specific Sitecore website that you have set up. It really depends, I guess, on what your intentions are. If you are intending to, I guess, develop this against multiple instances of Sitecore, then you might want to still do the gulp method that I mentioned. If you are developing this for a specific version of Sitecore, what you could do is definitely is use the Nougat Feeds to pull the specific versions of Sitecore that you need for your project only, and that way you don't necessarily need to use the gulp method. I guess it really depends on your method there, but yeah, looks like it's just about done. It's just running the last step, which is attaching databases. All right, now it's complete. Gives you a bunch of options here of things you can do. You can publish the site, make a backup, open Visual Studio, etc., etc. I'm just going to pick open in browser. Actually, I just noticed you can log in. I've actually never noticed this before, but you can actually open in browser, Sitecore client, and log in as an admin. That's pretty cool. So actually, I'm gonna do that option. So I'm gonna click finish. This is actually gonna open it in. This is going to open it in my IE, which is not my preferred browsing experience. But it's, so I might switch over to Chrome in a second. I'm not sure what it's doing. I guess it's logging us in. Or maybe it's initializing Sitecore first. When you have a fresh install, it's going to take a few minutes for the Sitecore instance to actually load, and then I guess then once it waits for it to load, then it will log us in, and we'll be ready to go. We're not going to be doing too much within Sitecore for this tutorial, but just going to show that we'll have that Sitecore 8.2 instance set up and ready to go. All right, it's basically now open back up. So it's completed that kind of initialization process, and now is trying to attempt to open our thing in Sitecore. In IE, like I mentioned, it never seems to work properly in IE. I'm not a big fan of IE. I don't think anybody is. So let's go into this environment and click paste that in. And this should take us right into Sitecore. So this just shows that Sitecore is set up, ready to go. So I think the next step is now to set up our publishing settings to publish the web project and data project and the component projects to this environment. So it's all good to go. Let's go back out, go back to our solution here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to see how it says create publishing settings. I'm going to click here and create new custom profile. I'll give it a name of debug, just kind of match our configuration settings up here, our configuration setting. Click OK. File system, I will do a file system deploy. So one way to do this is you can just do HP example, and that will publish everything to this folder. You could specify the exact path, etc. It's up to you really. So that's good with that. And settings, I will just set it to debug. Release mode would obviously not publish any PDB files, etc., and it'll be more defined for publishing or deploying the site. All right, so I'll click next, and I'll click publish. And basically this will attempt to take everything in this folder and publish it. Actually, I forgot one step, which is kind of important. It's very important to actually click on the web.config and click properties and set it to none. So it will not move this web.config into the Sitecore website folder, because you don't want to overwrite your Sitecore config, which is in this folder or for this website. So to kind of restore what we had there is I'll just go into my sandbox here, and I will take this web.config and I will go in an example project, and I will, oh wait, I got to go back one. So all my Sitecore instances install into Sitecore, this Sitecore folder. So I'll go in example 8.2 for the website, and I will paste this in. That way I can still load the site. So now it's published everything into that website folder. So that you should notice that inside here you should see the DLLs for that project, although I don't. Hold on 1 second. Oh, it's complaining that that's not found. That's because I did not specify it fully. So back up to connections. Example, it's actually example 8.2. So now I'll do a publish. So I didn't actually have to replace the web.config because I hadn't actually published it yet. All right, it's not complaining about it not being published. So now if we go back into the bin folder, you'll notice that the example DLLs are now here. Exactly what we wanted. Okay, so now the next step is to get the Sitecore DLLs into this project, because Glass without the Sitecore DLLs will not install the proper DLLs that you'll need in order to start doing Glass map files, etc. So to do this, I will go to, let's see here. So to do the Sitecore DLLs, I will go into this folder, and so like I mentioned, I could use a task tool like Gulp to do this, but I will just copy all the Sitecore DLLs from this folder. Say copy, and then I will go back to my folder, development, example, and I will just create a simple libraries folder, and I will paste this in. There we go. And now I should be able to start adding in, for example, I can add in the Sitecore kernel into the web project. So I will go to add reference, or I think it's just add reference. Now what I'll do is I'll browse, and I will make sure I'm in the proper folder. C, development, example, libraries, and then I'll pick the kernel from this folder. As the same as I will do this for also the example infrastructure project. This one. I will add that to the example infrastructure, and I will add it to the data project. So now I have DLL as part of both of these projects, all three of these projects. The next step is installing Glass. So Glass is pretty easy to install. All you need to do is install a Nougat package for that. So I will go into manage Nougat packages, and I will do a browse. I'm going to search for Glass. I'm just going to install the most latest Glass mapper. Glass mapper. That doesn't actually look correct. Alright, it's called glassmapper.sc. Sorry, I couldn't find it before. It was not quite where it usually is. So I'll install this. Actually, I don't really want pre-release for that. So yeah, I just want 4.2.1.189. I will click install, which will add it to my web project. I will say, do not show this again, and say OK. And it will be done in a few minutes, and basically at that point I will have access to Glass. We're pretty close to being done setting this up. So the next part is I will just show creating a simple view, controller view, and the ability to access Glass. There's a lot of takeaways and directions you can go from this demo, but such as installing your choice of TDS or Unicorn. I won't show that in this article or in this demo, but there are lots and lots of resources out there that show how to do that. So now that Glass is installed, I will go ahead and create a new controller. My famous and most well-known example is I will create a simple little blog. So I will create a controller called, which is MC5 controller empty, and I will call it article. One thing I like to do is create a never base class or a base controller. This will inherit from the Glass controller. That way, if you need to do some additional any additional class, any additional like properties or methods that you want to have access to all or have access to that from all your controllers, you can do that. So I will just call this a base controller, and it will inherit from Glass controller, which I will resolve by doing that. And I'll just leave it empty for now. I need to include a reference for Sitecore MVC. Let's go ahead and add a reference real quick. Browse. Just pull Sitecore MVC. Add. And voila. Now that should go away. All right. And then I will also create or I already created an article controller. Sometimes I'll put the base controller underneath a folder called base. Depends on what I want to do. So for this, I will just call this listing, and it will just return a view. I will, to prove that Glass is working, I will just create a var context equals well, Sitecore context, since it has access to glass. Sitecore context. I will not sure why it's not working. Oh, I need to inherit from my base controller, that's why. Sorry about that call. So yeah, I'll have a Sitecore context dot get current item. I will just set to, well, we don't have anything really defined, so this actually probably won't work. If we had a model defined up in our data project, I guess I could create one real quick. Class. I just will call this eyeglass base. Usually when I'm working with glass, I am working with TDS, which will, you have the ability to create an auto-generated glass base file, or auto-generated glass items from your templates. So this is a little different than I usually say. I just remembered it might be a good idea if I had glass actually installed on here. In this data project. So what I'll do is I'll right click here and manage Nougat Feeds, browse, and I will add glass.mapper.sc, and I will install into this project. So now that it's installed, I will now be able to define a simple name property, which just represents the item name. And I will, I always forget the how to do this. Sitecore type. It helps when you have there's a way to define default option. There we go, I figured it out. It's just Sitecore info attribute and then Sitecore info type of name. And I could do one other just to show that how you would do that. Sitecore info attribute, and I want Sitecore info type of template name. And this will be a string, template name, get set, getter and setter. Okay, so that's just a very simple representation of a very basic type. So then I could do here, I could do eyeglass base. And that would be that. And then I can return this context if I wanted to. This is not a real world example. Obviously, I would probably go back to the database and get a list of article listings or articles as some sort of collection type, but this just shows you that glass is working at this level. So I will also show the view. I'll right click and say go to view. Actually, I'm going to have to create the view. So I can do add, and I would select this option because it's a little bit easier to work with. And this will create a view that represents the control action that I just defined. I will set this to have a model of eyeglass base. I will find a using statement for this, which is the preferred way I like to do this, using example data models. I just realized I had something defined up there, but anyways, so then I could just have some sort of div call mid 6, and then inside of that I could just, I could do an HTML glass. Actually, it looks like glass is like. So one other step to do, and this is, I guess one I forgot, is you might want to define in your web.config within the views folder, there is another web.config. In this one, you would want to define some of the methods or some of the extension methods, etc., that are needed to run glass, etc. Let me get that list real quick. All right, I just added the more common ones. There's the Sitecore common namespaces you want to include, as well as the glass mapper ones. This will just allow you to, when you're calling these extension or these razor view methods. Another thing that I find really kind of a pain is that usually I have to restart Visual Studio after making changes to that web.config. I wish Microsoft would fix all that. So I will close, and then I will open that back up. So it's back open and it's back to that. So should be able to call my methods using Razor now. For some reason I can't right now, but I can call a Sitecore 1 field. So you could have that as a specific field. Not sure why glass won't work right now for me. I might have to find the wrong type. Let me change the order on this. Just raise it up a little bit. I don't know if that will matter too much, but all right, I figured out what it was. I didn't need those two references. I just need glassmapper.se.web.mvc. It's the only one I need. So now I can actually go in and go HTML glass.editable, and I can say x dot, it's hiding really quick, but x dot name. So I can say this name represents a field in Sitecore. So on this this view, it will find whatever item from Sitecore, it will find the name value. If you're on the front end, it will pull in the name. If you're in the experience center, it will allow you to edit that name field. And it's the same way the field works. So they're just similar functionalities. This kind of represents a controller rendering in Sitecore. Whereas if you were doing dot fields, it probably means you're rendering a view rendering. So that's pretty much it for this demo. Like I said, I didn't show TDS or Unicorn in this example, but this is fairly simple to set up. You probably would have for Unicorn, you would install it and you'd have a bunch of configs that you would just configure it to set to your environment. If you were using TDS, you would actually have another project. It'd probably be called TDS.master. You might have a TDS.master core. You might have a TDS.master uh, content. It depends on what your setup really entails. Um, like I said, if you were using TDS, there's the ability to code generate these models up here. So you don't have to go in and figure out what all the data attributes are. You can just have it auto generate a massive a file that has all the data models that represent your templates. All right. So last off, let's just go back to the PowerPoint. We'll just go right to the conclusion tab. Um, so like I said, that's the project setup. We basically set up a very simple solution that has 3 projects in it, but like I mentioned, you could have multiple more projects. This just kind of shows a starting point of where you'd start. There's a lot of options that I did not show, such as Helix, or I mentioned Gulp and how to use it as a task manager. I also mentioned um, using Sitecore Nougat Feeds. I also didn't demonstrate that. So there's a lot of things I didn't really show, but this kind of shows enough to get you kind of going on setting up a project and getting you moving forward with adding some of the more complex features of Sitecore. Lastly, I didn't really discuss this too much, but there is a pretty obvious difference between setting up a project from scratch versus just setting up a project from existing something that's already exists and already has been added to source control. So the steps there are a lot different. Some of the steps I mentioned for existing setup, if you're using a SIM, you don't have to go through a lot of those steps. Like your connection strings are already handled for you. Your data folder and your license files are already handled for you as long as you know where they're at and you've set up SIM properly. You should be good to go. So that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. Just refer to that slide. That has my email address, and I look forward to hearing your questions and helping you out.